Hello and welcome. I'm Ash Mannix, and it's been a while since I've done a pre-recorded uh, gameplay video. But I thought it would definitely be worth it for this game. So a little bit of backstory. Well, a little bit of context. This is the House in Fata Morgana, a Requiem for Innocence, which I believe is a game based in the same universe as the House in Fata Morgana, or maybe it's a different universe where it has the same characters but in different roles. Um, I have played through the House in Fata Morgana. My playthrough of that, or my Let's Play of that, is available on my channel. Um, One of my more successful Let's Plays. Uh, Mainly because the House in Fata Morgana is such, in my opinion, good visual novel. So my recommendation is not necessarily to watch my playthrough, but definitely if you can, I would recommend buying the VN off Steam or wherever and reading through it yourself, because it's definitely something. Um, it's definitely something. Sorry, I'm just gonna lower this. Music's beautiful, but um, it's definitely a game to be experienced or a visual novel to be read uh, in isolation and not solitude on your own, as opposed to watching a let's play. Yeah, something to play through, read through yourself, and then if you want to get an idiot's perspective of the game, you can watch my playthrough afterwards. Um, yeah, I do. I know. I realize that with let's plays, there's a good chance, especially with visual novels, that people will just watch through the let's plays and not want to read through the buy the game and visual novel and read through it themselves. But my let's plays are terrible, and I always put in my 2 cents and end up waffling a lot. So not the best way of just um reading, not the best way to go through the game without interruptions. So I like to hope that that helps people to maybe go towards maybe buying the game and reading through it themselves. But hey ho, what can I do? All I can say is I really like the House in Fata Morgana, and I knew that this uh, game existed, or I knew that there was at least one other game in the series, and I purposely left. I wanted to leave a good amount of time between playing the House in Fata Morgana and playing this, or something like this, whatever other games were in the series, because I wanted the House in Fata Morgana to kind of sit in my mind for a while. I don't know. I just wanted to give it time. And now here I am. I don't know. It's been a while since I finished the House in Fata Morgana. Maybe more, maybe a year or more. Don't know. Time is hard to. Like, so it feels so kind of like ephemeral now. Ever since lockdown and stuff. But hey ho. I'm going to switch to the full screen without my beautiful avatar face getting in the way. But yes, here we go. The House in Fata Morgana, a Requiem for Innocence. I have not looked too much into what the story is here. I just know that it features the same characters. So we have here, I believe, the witch. I'm trying not to spoil the house. I don't think that spoils anything. And the main character, um, from the house in Fata Morgana, if I remember correctly, Michelle. Um, but yes, let's. There's sub episodes. The main episode. Let me just check. What are the sub episodes? Tales. Acento del. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing this. Tales wasted away in obscurity. Happily ever after. Return to title. And then the main episode. Right. I'm going to start with the main episode because I do not know. See the side stories. Should I do this? I should do the side stories after, right? Let's start with the main episode. A Requiem for Innocence. Pretty late tonight, but I feel like this type of game is best played at night. when it's, at least when it's quiet. I don't know. Move the cursor to the bottom right of the corner of the screen to display the id game menu. You can save, load, progress, change game settings. Hear me speedily, O Lord, my spirit faileth. Hide not thy face from me, lest I be like unto them, to go down to the pit. Deliver me, O Lord, from mine enemies. I flee unto thee to hide me. Teach me to do thy will, for thou art my God. Thy spirit is good. Lead me into the land of uprightness. Quicken me, O Lord, for thy name's sake, for thy righteousness' sake. Bring my soul out of trouble. And of thy mercy cut off mine enemies and destroy all of them that afflict my soul, for I am thy servant. Psalms 1437-12. I kind of wish that. I really wish that didn't. The text didn't go by so quickly. I could read it properly, but hey ho. Hopefully, you guys were able to read it faster than I was able to. Let's see. And they're starting hard with the epic music. Cheers! A saint's blood and good fortune to all. Who's Barney? Oh, what? Yeah, they're starting hard here. Voices, so many voices, laughing, laughing, laughing. Was this the 10th such party? The 20th? I no longer had any idea. Now this feels, is this straight out of the House in Fata Morgana? So spoiler alert, I'm probably going to spoil parts of the House in Fata Morgana. So, while playing through this, so be warned, I suppose. But in the House in Fata Morgana, there was a character, the witch, who in their past had been, they had, I believe they had powers of some sort, and they were used by the king of the land, I believe, and they were tortured because the blood, that was it, the blood of the witch was able to cure ailments, and so they bled her and used her as just a slave, treated her like worse than you'd treat an animal, worse than you'd treat an animal that you had no respect for. And this seems like it's taken straight from that. Was this the 10th such party? The 20th? I no longer had any idea. The Lord's guests merely drank of my blood. My father had not blessed me with his miracle, so wealthy nobles could fill their goblets with it. My blood was for the poor, for the infirm and destitute. Why am I here? Why am I not doing my father's work? With each passing moment, my body grew colder and colder, while a mad, fiery fervor spread among the partygoers. Father, it hurts. My soul hurt far more than my body. It felt like it was cracked in a dozen places, about to shatter. Again and again, I told myself it was just a trial, that God was simply testing me. I didn't think I could bear it much longer. A horrible black miasma spilled from the wounds of my flesh, filling the room. It was probably an illusion, something only I could see. The miasma soon began consuming my spirits. All my life I spent telling myself to be pure, just, righteous, and all of that was corroding away, ripping me asunder. Father, O Lord, of thy mercy cut off mine enemies, and destroy all of them that afflict my soul. For I am thy servant, I am thy servant. Please, O Father, deliver unto these sinners thy holy judgment. Cast them down into the depths of hell for the sins they would commit against my faithful servant. Against thy faithful servant. Disguised as a prayer, I cursed them. The first time in my life, I wished someone ill. I did what a saint, what the daughter of God must never do. And in that moment, I committed a sin greater than anyone else in that room. Huh. The girl, look at her face! I began to hear panicked voices rising up around the hall. However, I was completely oblivious to the cause of the unrest. In fact, I assumed that perhaps God had heard my wish and struck down some of the partygoers. The Lord marched over to where I sat in chains, grabbing me by the hair and yanking my head up. In his other hand, he held a sword. A disgusted grimace was carved onto his face, as though he was looking down at the filthiest thing in the world. "You're a damned witch wearing a saint's skin." Jacopo? This is worse than I expected. The stench of rotting flesh hung in the air. Corpses were strewn about the room in varying states of decay. Blood pooled in the floor, black and thick as mud. An eyeball hung loose from one body, half decomposed and about as much a liquid as it was a solid. On many, white bone was visible through patches of flesh that had rotted away entirely. Some had been worked to death. Others died of any number of diseases. And they were the lucky ones. Several bodies bore stab wounds from head to toe. Others looked like someone had tried to rip them in two. Some had been burned until their entire bodies shriveled, and some were covered in blisters. There was no shortage of people who had obviously been tortured, though the man on the other end of the torture, the Lord Barnier, thought of it as more of a leisure activity. The Lord was spoken of in whispers as the second coming of the great tyrant of old, though it wasn't until I snuck into his manor and saw for myself that I truly understood how accurate that was. He was a damned psychopath. You know, I think I might be wrong. I think Requiem, I think this might actually be based. Requiem for Innocence might be. Yeah, I think I might be wrong about what I thought this was. It's not an alternate universe. Maybe this was set in the past. This is telling the story from the witch's past. I apologize that I couldn't make it in time to save you all too. I'm hardly a religious man, but for you I think I can spare a prayer. Rest in peace. Not myself today. Though I suppose that hadn't been a surprise considering what today is. I wonder if that girl from the other day is among the dead. No, I need to stay focused. If this goes south, I'll be the one joining the piles of bodies. God, I'm starting to get a little nervous. Don't go weak in the knees now, Jacopo. How can I ever expect to go out into the world if I can't even keep myself together for something as straightforward as this? I can't do this. I can do this, no problem. Let's start ourselves a revolt. It all began a little over 2 weeks earlier. The local lord's iron-fisted rule was destroying the commoners, and this went doubly for those living in poverty who were barely scraping by before taxes. You could hardly take 3 steps out in the slums without hearing someone curse the Lord. I have no idea who first proposed the plan. Everything came together so smoothly, so quickly, it's almost a blur. What started as an everyday litany of complaints hurled back and forth between the usual crew of young, indignant men in the pub soon escalated, ballooning into a full-fledged plot to strike back. He treats us like dog shit. We are the ones working his goddamn land. Let's give the bastard what's coming. Over the next few days, words of the plot spread through the slums, and the number of volunteers grew at an impressive pace. And the more people we had on board, the more realistic it all started to become. While the original plan amounted to charging in headlong with whatever weapons we could scrounge together, it quickly evolved into a more sensible scheme to infiltrate the Lord's manor and free his slaves. It was no secret that the Lord was purchasing far more slaves than he should have any reasonable use for. What we didn't know was what he did with the slaves, that the banquets he so loved to throw were actually 6 sadistic torture parties. The best we could do was infer their living conditions were less than ideal from the fact that the Lord kept acquiring more. And while the plan to free the Lord's slaves was undeniably rooted in a righteous desire, I would be lying if I said everyone's intentions were so pure. We wanted to right an injustice, absolutely. The prevailing desire was for vengeance, to give the Lord a little comeuppance. Part of it was also calculated. That would be advantageous for us to look like a slave revolt rather than a civilian uprising. If he struck from the outside, we were liable to bring the Lord's wrath down upon more than just a handful of us involved. But if the blow came from the inside, he couldn't blame us. Secondly, the Lord's mansion sat atop a hill, which meant his soldiers had the advantage of terrain. It would be nigh impossible for a band of lowly, ill-equipped peasants to break through his defences, and we certainly didn't have the money to hire a mercenary. No amount of righteous anger was getting us anywhere near that manor. On the other hand, quietly getting one person inside to stir the pot was far more feasible. So ultimately, freeing the slaves was a means to an end. It was our best chance to deal the Lord a real blow. Of course, that didn't mean we wouldn't save as many people as we could, nor did it mean it would be easy to pull off, or that any of us would make it out alive. The plan went as follows. We would find a slave trader willing to sell one of us to the Lord. Once they had infiltrated, they would spread word of the scheme to the other slaves, trying to get as many of them on board as possible. Finding a slave trader willing to cooperate was surprisingly easy. They're businessmen and slaves their product. While the majority didn't give a damn what happened to the slaves after they'd received payment, there were more than a few who were displeased knowing their precious wares were being squandered. Charming. Slaves are supposed to be long-term workers. They're not meant to be expendable. They require food and rest and some semblance of reasonable living conditions. It was far from a glamorous life, obviously, but most sensible slave owners at least had a vested interest in keeping their workers alive. However, that was far from the case with Lord Barnier. Slaves were, of course, the property of whoever purchased them, and a mere slave trader had no place complaining about how they were being treated. That didn't mean the traders had to like it, though, and there was a small collective of them who staunchly refused to do business with the Lord, quietly mocking any who did. Nobody openly spoke ill of the Lord, let alone opposed him directly. Not only because this land was under his control, but because he was a madman and everyone knew it. So they would help us get in and nothing more. But that was fine. That was all we needed from them to put our plan into action. In the vanguard of our operation, the one who would infiltrate the Lord's manor, was me. I volunteered for the position, partially in the heat of the moment, but also because I was confident I could pull it off. Above all, though, I didn't want to believe that I couldn't manage such a straightforward task. I had to step up and take initiative, or I would never escape this life as a poor, lowly slum dweller, crawling through the dirt. Everyone, nobles and peasants alike, looking down on me, thinking I'm worthless. That would be me for my whole pathetic life. Like hell, I was going to let that happen. I wanted to claw my way up, as high as I could manage. I didn't want to surrender, to accept that I was powerless. I wanted to make something of my one and only life. We chose the beginning of the Lord's next banquet for my infiltration. And that was when I saw the horror for myself. The abuse and the torture he put the slaves through was a goddamn blood banquet. Any mistake, no matter how small, would invite harsh discipline. If Barnier was in a particularly foul mood that day, he would physically beat the wrongdoer. He had a particular fondness for activities that drew blood, though, and he would regularly gather together nobles with similar predilections at his manor. Once a banquet had begun, it generally continued for around 2 weeks. 2 weeks? The first thing I did after infiltrating was spread word of the plan to other slaves. To be honest, I assumed it would be easy getting them to cooperate. They should have reviled Barnier more than anyone, after all. But I couldn't have been more wrong. Every ounce of willpower had been drained from them. They were malnourished, unrested, and violently oppressed. I could hardly have convinced them to swat a mosquito. He had them completely under his thumb. Everyone was utterly terrified to fight back against Barnier. They would just as soon take their own lives. Hardly a day in, and the plan already seemed to have hit a wall. A full week I spent trying and failing to convince a single soul to assist in the revolt. Just as I was beginning to fear it might not work if, after all. Who's this person? We need to talk. Come with me. He was a tall, muscular slave who spent most of his time doing physical labor. Look at this dude. Epic. How the hell is this guy a slave? How can he, like... How are they feeding him enough to, like, maintain that physique? Oh, here we go. Ah, yes. Wait, let me just do a save. Oh, yeah. This is just like the House in Fata Morgana. Awesome. Despite the poor conditions, he seemed to be keeping himself in rather good shape. Yeah, how? And unlike the other slaves, his eyes weren't filled with fear and resignation. But it wasn't hope I saw in them either. Rather, they looked like the eyes of a bloodthirsty wolf. Wait a minute. Is this the beast? Right, no spoilers. I'm trying not to do any spoilers. And his unkempt, greasy blonde hair only served to amplify the primal impression he gave off. Between that and the faint, cocky smirk visible on his lips, he more resembled the head of a gang of ruffians than a slave. I wasn't sure it was entirely wise to accompany him anywhere. But against my better judgment, and with far too little information, I followed the man to the Great Hall. There were a dozen or so nobles and upper-classmen and women clustered about the hall. The air was filled with the scent of aromatic herbs, and it wasn't long before I realized they were meant to mask the smell of blood. A large table was lined with plates stacked with piles of glistening dark red meat. Noblemen sneered at us with wet lips as we entered the room. The contrast between the nobles' practiced graceful mannerisms and the grotesque feast of which they were partaking was so bizarre I simply stood there aghast. There was no room for anger to form. The Lord stood on a platform like a small stage at the far end of the room. Are you the slave who offered to be the day's entertainment? The buff man nodded, dropping down to one knee. What does he mean by entertainment? Surely you've tired of merely inflicting pain on helpless slaves. Would you, by chance, be interested in something a little more exciting? Could you be any more disrespectful, Lord Barnier? Oh wait, Lord Barnier, you'd do best to rid yourself of barbarians such as him. There, give the poor man a break. Can't expect an uneducated slave to be properly versed in the ways of polite society. Now, elaborate, slave. Me and him, we duel right here, right now. Do you seriously think we haven't already put slaves against each other numerous times by now? If that's all, tell me, were they as vigorous as the two of us? Young and chomping at the bit. Well, if all you want to see is a couple of half-dead slaves limply flailing at each other, then help yourselves. But you're not gonna find many here that can give you a fight with some real oomph, you know. Hell, half the slaves here'd probably keel over with just a little shove. So I figured you might be up for a little change of pace. A barbarian like me. Whoa, I never agreed to this. Suck it up, you're a slave. Since when have you had the right to agree to anything? You make a compelling argument. Gratien, was it? My lord knows my name. I'm honored. I only remembered because you came very highly recommended. The slave trader said you were descended from a line of warriors that made a name for themselves fighting in the ancient Colosseum. Wait, he was a... thingy, what do you call it? Gladiator? I had assumed he was exaggerating, but perhaps there was some truth to it after all. Who can say? Can tell you about my ancestors. What I can tell you is I just love a good duel. What in the Colosseum? Descended from gladiators? And I'm supposed to go 1-on-1 against him? Very well. Guards, bring these 2 swords. Sir! Shit. What is he hoping to accomplish? To win Barnia's favour? I guess I'll just have to hope I can catch him by surprise as soon as... Hey, kid, listen up. What? Eyes forward. And keep it down. Listen carefully. Don't get any wise ideas, got it? Let's go along with it. Everything on the level. Why are you scheming? You'll find out soon enough, assuming you can handle a sword anyhow. 2 guards approached us, each carrying a longsword. It was heavier than I expected, and it felt awkward in my hands. Both of our blades were badly chipped, clearly old and battle-worn. Of course, they wouldn't give new quality weapons to a pair of slaves, but a sword was still a sword. Beaten though they may have been, still had to be careful, or I'd be dead before I ever got the slave revolt off the ground. That said, I had survived this long in the slums. I wasn't completely helpless, and I had experience with a dagger, though I wasn't sure how much help that would be now. The longer 2-handed weapon still felt awkward in my hands. As I squinted at the blade's hilt and adjusted my grip, trying to familiarize myself with the feel of it, Barnier took a seat, readying himself to spectate. That's when I caught sight of what lay hidden at the back of the stage. What? I stood there staring agape, completely forgetting I was but moments from a duel with a man twice my size. The back of the stage was what looked like an altar, draped in a thick white sheet, and stained red. Atop it sat a young girl covered in gashes. Her head was drooped, so I couldn't see her face. But judging from her size, I didn't think she could be more than 10 years of age. Some wounds were older and had already scabbed over. Some were swollen, bright red protrusions on her pale skin. Some were oozing pus, and others were so fresh they were still bleeding. It was difficult to find a part of her body that wasn't cut. Hey, what do you think you're doing to that girl? I don't care who you are, no one deserves that. Even as I shouted at the Lord, the girl remained motionless. She seemed unconscious. Not dead yet, but it wouldn't be long. Silence, cur. I don't recall giving you permission to speak. Or if you'd rather lose your head right now, continue on as you are. Damn desperate. Now go on, get started. Give us a show befitting of this grand affair. Fighting my urge to snap back at him, I turned to face the slave named Gratian. The other guests lined the walls, whispering among themselves, speculating about the potential victor. The crowd was so overwhelmingly in Gratian's favour, to absolutely no surprise, they didn't even bother taking bets. Try not to go down one blow, kid. Hold on, what's the point of this? Slowly, Gratian lowered into a crouch, and in the next second he leapt at me like a tiger. There was an audible whoosh. Before I even had time to gasp, he was mere inches away. What choice do I have? I swung my sword up, catching Gratian's blade mid-descent and attempting a parry, but there was far more weight in his strike than I had expected. The impact caused my hands to sting painfully and my knees to buckle. I clenched my teeth, trying at the very least to hold my ground. Rah! Gratian barely gave me time to recover, let alone strike back, before launching into a second attack. He handled the longsword so effortlessly, swinging it through the air in such impressive, perfect arcs that I could hardly believe we were both using the same weapon. I twisted out of the way, but not quite in time. The tip of his blade skimmed the skin of my neck. And then, not even giving me a chance to catch my balance, he thrust his blade at me. While I managed to deflect the attacks just in time, I wasn't able to follow through. Meanwhile, a wide, mocking smirk spread across Gratian's face. He seemed to be having the time of his life. Come on, kid! You're gonna have to do better than that if you want to keep your head. Ugh. I rattled off several insults in my head, but unlike him, I couldn't spare the energy to put them into words. Pick up, boy! God damn. Oh, you got, kid. I thought you'd fare a little better. Shut your damn mouth. I was stuck on the defensive, and with every strike he pushed me further and further back. I was almost up against the wall. I thought he said this was part of some plan. Or was he just trying to get me to let my guard down? He's conspiring with the Lord. He must be. Why challenge me to a duel, though? Did someone spill word of the plan to him? Come on, give me your best shot, boy. Yes, very funny. You know damn well I'm barely managing as it is. Gotta at least try. Don't want to put our audience to sleep now, do we? Even the bones in my forearms are starting to sting. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. Here, let me show you how it's done. God, I can't get a damn inch on him. Much more of this and I'll be up against the wall. I'm dead if I don't go on the offensive. Now's my last chance. Now's my last chance while I've still got breathing room. Hey, big guy, you may think you have the advantage, but not for long. Ha, that's rich. Coming from a guy who can't even get one swing on me. It was all a trick to get your guard down. I've been saving this one for you, meathead. Good luck dodging it. With that hulking body of yours? Now that's more like it. Let me have it, kid. I hopped backward a couple of paces until my heel was pressed up against the wall. There was no backing down. Not anymore. Breathing heavily, I lifted my blade, pointing it at Gretian. Pointed his in turn, a cocky grin plastered on his face. And then I kicked off the ground hard, sending me flying toward him, my sword held down near my waist, his above his head, and then whoosh. Huh! He whiffed, his blade dripping through the air just over my head. The mere force of the gale created by his swing was so intense, for a brief moment I thought he might have knocked my head clean off my shoulders. But I was still breathing. And despite the exhaustion, my mind was incredibly clear and focused. I hadn't swung up at him, but slid across the floor. Your back's wide open. I lurched to my feet, spinning around, and swung my sword at his neck with everything I had. What? But my would-be grand comeback was deflected from behind without a bat of an eye. And hardly a wimpy deflect for that matter. My hands felt like they were on fire. Little bit on the dirty side that was, but hey, not half bad, kid. Damn it. Just a little more oomph to that swing and you might have landed it. Too bad. Too bad. Don't stand a chance against him head on, but he's not one to fall for the same trick twice. Need a new plan. Back against the wall with ya. Son of a... What's the matter, kid? That's all you got. After all that talking, I was expecting a little more from you. He's got me completely under his thumb. I'm dead if I don't do something, but I can barely lift my arms anymore. It's getting harder to breathe. My vision's going blurry. I can't die yet. Not here, not now, and not to this damn brute. There has to be something. An opening I'm not seeing. Anything. Some way to turn the tables. Huh? Am I imagining it, or did I react to that quicker than usual? Is he doing what I think he's doing? Patterns were forming in my mind. I'd been through this routine so many times now, my body instinctively knew what came next. I'd parried his strike entirely by reflex. I wasn't so full of myself as to think it was a sign I was gaining the upper hand. As much as I loathed to admit it, he had every imaginable advantage over me. I should have realised what he was doing sooner, but I'd been so focused on keeping my head attached and my sword in my hands that I didn't have the spare mental capacity to see beyond that. He was in complete control. The only reason I was able to keep up with him was because he was letting me. Because he was repeating the same sequence of attacks again and again. If I'm right, then next will come from above. Oh ho! Right on the money. A clang like the pealing of a bell echoed through the halls our blades collided. It was a much cleaner, more satisfying sound than they had made when I was struggling to keep up. I still don't know what he's scheming. I'm not going to throw away this chance to win back some ground. Sparks flew with each clash of our swords, and Gratian's smirk grew wider. Could hear murmuring bubble up in the gallery as the tides turned. Cheering, cursing, confused gasps. But before long the sound seemed to grow distant. It was just me and Gratian in a bubble of silence. Not even the sound of metal striking metal. My heavy breathing. The stomping of our feet. The distractingly loud pounding of my heart. The blood pumping through my veins. All wisped away into nothing. Every one of my senses were focused on exactly two things. The image of our swords cutting clear arcs through the air, and Gratian's intent. That's it. Next, overhead, he whispered so quietly that by all rights I could never have heard it. But his intentions came through loud and clear. As if being controlled by that voice, I swung my sword down. After about a half dozen such clashes, we locked blades and had a brief shoving match before putting a little distance between each other. Then we went at it again. The audience, it would have looked like a fierce battle to the death, but I felt more like we were dancing than anything. Well, he was dancing, I was merely following his lead. If that was his plan, whatever his plan was, I had no choice but to dance to his beat. The only thing improvisation would get me is a sword through the heart. Meanwhile, sticking to the plan, I had nothing to worry about, no reason to fear his sword might go off course. After several more fierce clashes, we got in close again. We were both breathing pretty heavily by that point. I was drenched in sweat, and it felt like I'd collapse right then and there if I loosened up even for a second. Gratian tossed a glance off to the side for the briefest of moments. His lips came together, curling up into a smile. Listen up. 3 paces back, then charge. Swing down as hard as you can. Put everything you've got into it. As soon as I signaled my acknowledgement, Gratian parried my sword off to the side. 1, 2, 3 paces back, then I gathered my strength into my legs. I crouched, like he had at the beginning of the duel, envisioning myself as a tiger ready to pounce. And then we leapt at each other in perfect sync. What? The harsh sound of metal striking metal, more piercing than anything else up to that point. For a heartbeat, the world went white. Then, the whoosh of something ripping through the air. It wasn't for another second or two that I realized what had happened. Breathing heavily, I looked down at the sword in my hands, only to find half of it missing. Gratian's blade appeared to have snapped as well. The gallery began buzzing. Are you all right? How dreadfully dangerous. Eh. The first grin spread across Gratian's lips. I finally understood what he had been scheming. He wanted the swords to break. He wanted it to look like an accident, hoping that when the shattered blades went flying, a noble or two would be caught in the crossfire. That explained the whole song and dance, why he had us hitting each other's blades in the same spots again and again. But how the hell would you ever expect that to work? That said, if the fight had gone on much longer, I don't think I would have lasted. His plan seemed to have gotten about as well as you could reasonably expect. One piece landed near Barney and the other embedded in a table. That's fine by me. I'd rather avoid causing any more of a scene before the actual revolt. Not that I would be opposed to seeing any of these madmen skewered. Gratian wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his hand and surveyed the room. As obviously outclassed as he was by all the nobles, he still seemed much larger than anyone else in the room. He took a few moments to catch his breath, then sauntered over to the centre of the great hall, taking another good look around the room before saying, Apologies for the disturbance, my lord. While ordinarily a duel's supposed to end with someone's head, looks like that's out of the question today. So mayhap we can reschedule, put on another show in a day or two, if you would like. Barney seemed less than pleased with the outcome, but considering how rattled his guests were, he couldn't press the matter either. Very well. Now I believe you would two deserve a reward for such a fine show. Oh, what kind of reward? One I'm sure you'll be quite pleased with. The leftovers from today's feast. Gourmet cuisine the likes of which you mere slaves could only dream of getting your dirty hands on. You mean those bleeding scraps of mystery meat? Ha, worry not, there's pork in there. What? Or does your religion prohibit you from eating pig? Nah, I gave up on religion long ago. I'm fine with eating meat. Most meat, anyway. I'll have the other slaves bring it down this evening, then. Now the show's over. Be gone with you. Gone we be, my lord. I'm still concerned about that girl. There's nothing I can do for her right now. Hopefully she lasts long enough for the revolt, but with wounds like that. Hey, kid, pick your beat ass up and let's get out of here. I'm not beat, thank you very much. Who you try to fool with your wheezing up a lung? Getting huffy about it only makes you look more pathetic. Piss off, you inhuman monster. Now, do have a wonderful day, ladies and gents. Interesting. Once we were out of the hall and in the corridor, I took several deep breaths, finally letting loose some of the tension that had built up within me. As we made our way through the corridors, the sound of the nobles laughing and chattering away amongst themselves faded into nothing. We headed for the rather barren waiting room where slaves without assignments were kept. In essence, it was a human closet. I looked up at Gratian, who was standing beside me. I had about a dozen things I wanted to say to him, but I couldn't organize my thoughts into words. So I simply shrugged and pursed my lips. Yeah, that was a shame. Huh? What was a shame? You were hoping to kill at least one noble when the swords broke, weren't you? If only. Not that skilled, hell no. You could have fooled me. If anything, I'd say we're lucky it went as well as it did. It's a damn good thing they gave us their old crusty swords, or we'd never manage to break 'em at all. If not to skewer one of the nobles, then why go to such lengths at all? Well, 'cause otherwise we'd had to fight to the death, of course. No, that's not what I'm... Of course we both know who'd be standing here then. As much as I hate to admit it, he has me beat in almost every category. For God's sake, how do you even get that good with a sword? Is it hereditary or something? What I'm trying to figure out is what your ultimate objective was in this whole facade. Why challenge me to the duel at all? You're planning a revolt, aren't you, kid? What does that have to do with anything? Just answer the question. Denying it will only delay the inevitable, so no point in that. And I'm fairly certain he's not on the Lord's side, at least. If he was just trying to win the Lord's favour, I can't imagine the duel would have ended the way it did. You can probably trust him. Yes, I am. And I need the other slaves' help to pull it off. But the little drones have been sucked to all their fight, and you can't get anyone on board. Why even ask the question if you already know the answer? Hey now, no need for the lip, kid. I brought it up because I'm trying to tell you I'm in. You're in? Excuse me? What about anything you've done today would make me think you're in? Bear with me for a sec and put yourself in other slaves' places. Some dick they never met before shows up out of the blue saying, I've organised to have you all set free and I need your help to do it. You think they're going to buy into it? Fair enough. But it is true that I have people outside. Don't matter. You could be lying through your teeth and it wouldn't change a damn thing. All that matters is whether they think you're worth getting behind. I see your point. The slaves have been driven into the very depths of despair. They need someone charismatic enough to pull them out of that pit before they can be sparked to take any sort of action. Before infiltrating, I imagined it would be much simpler. It would seem that was rather naive of me. That was a whole lot of words to say the same thing I just said. Forget your fancy metaphors. It all boils down to this. Do they think you have a chance of pulling it off? Yes or no? These people, they don't got the energy to go all philosophical. They go with their gut. The quickest way to their gut. Show them you're strong. Ah, now I'm starting to understand what the duel was for. The other slaves already know of your prowess, so if I were to fight on the same level as you, then they'd be willing to hear you out, exactly. Oh, this guy really thinks. Ha! Whoa there, kid, why the sigh? You try to blow this place down? You could have easily accomplished that without putting on a damn show in front of the Lord and putting my life in danger. It wasn't just for the other slaves, kid. What do you mean? I wanted to make sure you weren't some yellow-bellied pissant. That you're actually capable of doing what you promise. And now that I know you've got a semi-functional spine, I'm willing to help out with the revolt. Semi-functional, huh? Well, I'm glad I didn't disappoint you then. Given my performance back there, I couldn't blame you if you deemed me beyond hope. Give yourself a little more credit, kid. While I'm pretty sure the stories about my ancestors being gladiators are exaggerated, I did participate in a few death games myself back before I ended up here. You should consider it a badge of honour that you fought a brute like me and lived to tell the tale. I was under the impression the church put an end to gladiatorial games. Ah, right, I went underground. The rules may change, but not people. Always a market for blood sports. Then, yeah. Yada yada, I got sold to the Lord, and here I am. That probably explains what he meant when he said he had given up on religion. So what's your story, kid? My money's on some rich aristocrat what got it in his head he wanted to play hero and stop Big Bad Lord from being mean to his slaves. What the hell gave you that idea? You strike me as more a prissy rich boy than a ruffian is all. A prissy rich boy? I come from the slums. So no, I'm not just some upper-class punk-playing hero. That a fact? Well, colour me surprised. You sure don't look or act like any of the slum boys I know. That's probably because... Nothing. And now I'm even more curious, damn it. Honestly, it's not that interesting, I promise. Forget I said anything. It's because I want to be able to blend in when I eventually leave the slums. But he doesn't need to know that. I only just met him. Whatever you say then. In that case, how about we do some proper introductions, huh? Name's Gratian, which you should already know. Nice meeting ya, kid. Jacopo. I'm very glad to have your support, Gratian. Don't mention it. I've been wanting to make the scumbags eat dirt myself. This is the perfect chance. Oh right, one more thing I wanted to ask. What? How old are you? Excuse me? Is that relevant to anything? Jeez, kid, someone really needs to teach you how to shut up and answer a simple question. I'm 19. Bloody hell. Oh, thank God, I'm 20. And I don't have to feel like an ass for calling you a kid. I'm only a year younger. That hardly makes me a kid. A year's a long time, kid. Not that I've got that off my... Now that I've got that off my shoulders, I can put my all into helping you with your revolt. I'm starting to wonder if I even want this guy's help. Once I had Gratian on board, it was remarkable how quick the rest of the slaves were to join in. They knew him, and they respected him, and that respect went a long way toward improving my own standing. As far as they were concerned, I had fought Gratian and managed to hold my own. And the big man was right. It wasn't a clever plan or a moving speech these people needed to put the light back in their eyes. It was a show of strength. Over the next few days, as Barney and his guests indulged themselves, word of the plan quietly spread beneath the surface. I started to see signs of life for the first time since I had arrived. The majority of the slaves were emaciated and weak. There was a good possibility the guards would kill many of them. But still, I urged on any who hesitated by saying, if you choose to stay, you're guaranteed to be killed eventually. It was true, to be sure, but in essence I was threatening them, help or be left behind to die. That was enough to convince them to grab onto the thread of hope I was offering, however frail it may be. We chose the 13th day of the banquet to commence the revolt. Waiting until almost the end of the party's usual 2-week duration gave us a slight tactical advantage. Naturally, Barnia's guests did not attend without their own protection, but after being made to watch over almost 2 weeks of debauchery, the guards would start getting exhausted. They would stop caring. And that was exactly what we needed. Hey there, Jacopo. Everything's good to go on my end. We can give Lord Asso what's coming whenever you're ready. Thank you. I appreciate all your help. Whoa there, kid. Save the thanks for after we get out of here with our heads still attached. Fair enough. Then how about this? If you both survive, I'll take you to the best pub in the slums. As long as there's pretty ladies, count me in. A man of culture. There's one I can introduce you to, if you don't mind your girls headstrong and with a little bit of bite. Tough and pretty, now that I can get behind. I spent so long surrounded by all these half-dead drones I could sure stand for some good-natured abuse right about now. Oh, sorry, that was Gratian. Damn. Wait, can I... There we go. I spent so long surrounded by all these half-dead drones that I could sure stand for some good-natured abuse right about now. Good-natured might be a bit of a stretch. Rub it the wrong way and you'll find yourself short as a pair of jewels. I think I'll pass that one then. I don't care how much of a looker she is. I ain't ready for her to be my last. How about this then? I tell you what I'm looking for and you have someone picked out for me by the time this is all over. Bloody hell. Flexible in looks, but slender and short are a must. Meaty girls ain't really my type. Meaty girls ain't really my type. It's so bad. Blonde hair and blue eyes are a plus, but it ain't a deal breaker. Hey man, man of culture. Dear, oh dear. And I like him to be a bit... But slow down there. You've got your head way too far in the clouds if you think you're going to find your ideal wife at a brothel in the slums. Hey now, how do you expect me to give this my all without something to look forward to on the other side? I suppose it is a decent motivator. See? You get me? Now, on to business. And I think... we're going to leave it there for today. Just about hit the hour mark. I think I'm going to do these recordings in like roughly hour chunks. But yes, The House in Fata Morgana, a Requiem for Innocence. I've realised now that this is the backstory of the witch from The House in Fata Morgana, or a more detailed story of it, because we just got kind of like highlights of it. Well, I mean, it was talked about. It was definitely talked about in The House in Fata Morgana, but we seem to be getting a more detailed story of what actually happened to her, at least from the point that when she was imprisoned by the Lord. I don't know if he was a king or not or whatnot, but anyway, I like Gratian and Jacopo. In The House in Fata Morgana, his character appears in a very different position, and he's a bit of an arsehole. To be fair, he's a bit of an arsehole in here as well. And I'm beginning to understand these characters. So this is set in the past compared to The House in Fata Morgana. In The House in Fata Morgana, some of these characters appear again, and I think are, in a sense, there's like a curse around them. That's all I'm going to say. I know I'm going to say this. There's probably going to be some spoilers in The House in Fata Morgana. I don't want to spoil it too much. But anyway, I think I'll stop waffling and I'll leave it there for now. This is The House in Fata Morgana, a Requiem for Innocence. I am Ash Mannix, and I'll hopefully see you guys next time. Bye-bye.